This will affect all property. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee, because the article I want to look at is highlighting an issue that is going to ripple through and affect all property. And we've talked about it several times on this channel, but now it seems to be coming to a head. Now that is our Australian dependence on international students, particularly with our property sector. We've seen time and time again just the media and other universities even concerned about the decline in international students. South Australia was flying in special plane loads of international students just to get them over here. I remember from my days of studying architecture, and I felt sorry for some of the students coming over here because they were frustrated, particularly when you had a lecturer from one semester to another just copying and pasting their work and charging them all over again. So, perhaps the quality isn't what people expect. Nevertheless, our property industry has grown around a constant influx of international students. We've all seen the student accommodation jumping up everywhere in the city. Modernist-inspired boxes with tiny cardboard, shoebox-sized little apartments, where a normal person isn't even allowed to live, where they've got all these strata requirements that is only for students, where people are investing in it, hoping, well, I don't know if they're hoping to get any capital gains because it'd be tiny, but hoping to at least get a regular stream of income from that flow of international tourists, or students, not even counting the tourists. Well, that's taken a big hit because of the international lockdowns. But also, well, students are telling each other to stay away. And that's going to have an impact on our property sector, everyone. It is going to hit property. It's going to hit all the investment grade apartments that people are buying for students, or hoping to leverage students to get a return from. That's going to hit the yield there, that's going to hit the capital growth, and we're going to start to see more and more of them appear on the market. Sydney prices are already falling, with some apartments down 15%. We're going back in time. This golden goose, as they're saying here in the article, of property prices always going up, maybe it's coming to an end. Will that flow through to housing? That is the question. It might. There's a lot of housing that's bought just for students. We'll have to see. It could be also investors that have invested heavily in properties targeting internationals are forced to sell some investment properties, and that will flow through. It might affect the demand for property and calls from the bank to have forced sales. So let's look at this. Killing the golden goose, how Australia's international students are being driven away. And I'll have a shot of coffee before we get into this. It's good coffee. Not really, guys. People are asking me, mentioned good coffee. What are you drinking? It's the cheapest stuff I can get from Aldi. I've trained myself now through years of late night architectural project work to drink horrific coffee. I guess, it's good for when we're going into a deep recession. So, international student visa applications from outside Australia have dropped off a cliff, raising serious concerns of an increasing budget black hole for Australian higher education. And this is, it's the ABC, so they're going to focus on this. The amount of funding that the universities receive from these international students is concerning, particularly for the potential conflict of interest it raises with, free speech and maybe public criticism against other ideological regimes. We're seeing that manifest here in Queensland University. And that's just one side of it. I'm focusing on the property because that's what everyone is concerned about. But just the conflict of interest and, our university system itself, it's not really doing well. If we look at our education standards, just in, school, in reading, maths and science, we haven't done particularly well. The building education revolution hasn't really had that payback it was, hoping to have. So, just 72,397 student visa applications have been received from prospective overseas students from January to July. 40% of the total for the same period last year, Department of Home Affairs data shows. So we've got a 60% decline in international student applications. The drop-off became particularly acute from April, when Australia was well into its national shutdown. In June, normally a peak month, applications were down 30,000 on the year before, with just 4,062 submitted from people currently overseas. Frankly, I'm surprised. We can see the chart here. I'm surprised that many people are actually applying to come over here. I mean, look at that. And this is a population that you need to keep pulling through to fund our property. Because we have this is an article. I know it's a few years old, but, housing for foreign students, demand surpasses supply. This is from 2018, in August. The number of overseas students studying in Australian universities has surged over the past years, calling for an increase in quality student housing options. Sydney University alone, over the 10 years from 2005 to 15, the number of foreign students increased by 13,784. In the following 2 years, from 15 to 17, it jumped by 20,000. There you go. A recent student housing report published by Knight Frank revealed that almost 20% of Australian universities' operating revenue is derived from international student fees, and in some instances as high as 30%. So our universities are, they're addicted to it. They're addicted to these international students coming over here. And it makes sense when you see these figures, when you went through university and you see all the support that they're provided. But when you talk to them and realize how much they get paid, or how much they pay to come here and what they're getting, I felt sorry for them. I really did. And I mean, a lot of them want to learn English, so you go out of your way to make friends, and particularly with a lot of the internationals, and you see the people who made the effort to learn English and make friends. They do a lot better than the people who were just a bit shy. It's kind of tough. I remember we had some Italians at and we had a house party, and I taught them the Australian delicacy of drinking red wine with Vegemite. That was a bit mean, but they appreciated it. So it's just collapsed, said Peter Hurley from Victoria University's Mitchell Institute for Education and Health Policy. This is not just the university problem. International students spend much more on the economy than just on student fees, and so it has an effect on the entire economy when they aren't coming. Well, yeah, it does. I mean, think about it. A lot of them will come over. Some of them will go to a completely empty property, and they'll furnish it. They'll fully furnish it. They'll have to buy a fridge. They'll have to buy this. They'll have to buy that. And then when they leave, they have to on-sell it. The international student education was worth $37.6 billion to the Australian economy last year, but continued border closures are putting that at risk. Well, if we have a look, let's bring up some other sectors here. Let's bring up some other sectors just to give it a bit of a comparison. We'll jump over here so we can see it. This is from the Observatory of Economic Complexity, and we can see just some of our other exports. So international education was $37.6 billion. Coal is $57 billion. So coal's beating it. Iron ore is $48 billion. And then it looks like it's third, isn't it? Third. We've got coal, 57, iron ore, 48, and then petroleum gas at 17.6. So international education is a bigger export for Australia than petroleum gas. So can you see how it all ties together? This will influence the university education sector. It will also influence the property sector, and then less spending will ripple through to other parts of the economy. So the question is, how do we get into this situation before where so many parts of our economy are dependent on international arrivals for students? Analysis from the Mitchell Institute forecast a $19 billion loss in student revenue over the next 3 years if the international borders remain closed until the end of 2021. The National Tertiary Education Union estimates at least 12,500 jobs have already been lost in the sector this year, largely as a result of the loss of international student fees. We modeled what the impact would have been with a good scenario and a bad scenario, Dr. Hurley said. The bad is happening and is likely to get worse, because the longer those borders stay shut, the less likely we're going to get back those international students. But an increasing body of evidence suggests it is not only the border closures that are turning international students off Australia, but also the way they've been treated during the pandemic. So, killing the golden goose, exploitation, racism, and lack of government support are all contributing to international students becoming disillusioned with Australia. A survey released last month of more than 5,000 international students by the Migrant Workers Justice Initiative found 59% of respondents were now less likely to recommend Australia as a study destination than before the pandemic. Alarmingly, it was even higher in two key markets, with 76% of Chinese students and 69% of Nepalese students reporting being less likely to recommend Australia. Racism towards international students was also rampant, with almost a quarter reporting being verbally racially abused, rising to more than half of Chinese respondents. International students and other temporary migrants were denied federal government supports, including JobKeeper and JobSeeker, despite 70%, according to the survey, losing hours or employment altogether. According to co-author Associate Professor Laurie Berg of the Faculty of Law at the University of Technology of Sydney, the Prime Minister's statement in April that students should make their way home if they could no longer support themselves was frequently cited by disillusioned respondents. Thousands expressed anger and distress at the Australian government, and hundreds mentioned the PM's statement specifically. In all, 35% of respondents said they would run out of funds by October, and a third said they had to seek emergency support to meet their basic needs. That was the case for master's student at La Trobe University, Swapna Karanam. She lost her job as a waitress at the start of the pandemic and has been relying on food from charities and her local council to survive. Several NGOs helped me, giving me food and food vouchers to buy groceries, she said. Coming to rent for 2 months, I'm using my savings, and after 1 month, I applied for grants. So this sounds like there's plenty of support out there if you can get it. It sounds pretty good. I mean, guys, this is a global issue here. The manufacturing engineering student has just received a Victorian government rent relief grant worth up to $3,000, which will help her get to the end of the academic year. Her flatmate Abish Chavala, who was doing the same course, was lucky enough to keep his job, but his hours as an overnight paper deliverer have been reduced. For months, he'd been barely scraping by, earning $350 to $400, of which $70 goes straight to petrol costs for his delivery job. This $400 is not enough for me to rent, for rent, bills and maintenance, he said. He feels let down by Australia and says because of his treatment during the pandemic, he will tell his friends to go elsewhere. I'm sorry, I can't recommend they come to Australia to study, he said. I mean, my understanding was that if you're coming to another country as an international student, you had to have a decent amount of cash reserves available. The myth about wealthy students. Dr. Berg said for years, international students have been treated as cash cows, yet often faced exploitation by employers and financial hardship even before the pandemic. Many felt like they were treated purely as revenue streams, and then, having been abandoned when they themselves were in need, she said, well, yeah, that's all you are to the unis, guys. That's all they are. Revenue streams. That's how the universities treat them. Is that a harsh reality? They're 30% of their revenue of some of these universities is dependent on bringing in these students. Why do you think they're lax on all of the entry requirements? You know, if they really cared about the students, they wouldn't let people that had sub-English skills into the country. They don't. They just want to make the money. Come on. Let's not be naive here, guys. This is what the universities are like. So Dr. Hurley agreed. I think there is a bit of a myth that international students are wealthy, he said. Some are wealthy, but many don't have huge means behind them. Mr. Chavela's experience was far from the glowing image of Australia the glossy education brochures promised even before the pandemic. He borrowed more than $50,000 to study in Australia after an education consultant in India convinced him to ditch the significantly cheaper course to which he'd already been accepted in the... Oh, mate. Oh, well, you got done. It's got nothing to do. It's the education consultant in India that screwed you over, mate. It's not the Australian system. You got caught. You need to watch some Dave Ramsey, mate. You need to watch some Dave Ramsey and look at just how these idiots in America are spending a fortune on university degrees to go to some posh private thing when there's cheaper cheaper options available to them, but they want to go out of state, or they want to go somewhere nice, or they like the houses. You know, he does a lot. He does some good ranting. Ramsey does. You know, that's what I have to aspire to. Ramsey type of rants. So, every consultant in Hyderabad I visited said Australia would be best, that I could work part-time and pay back my fees, he said. But when he got here, the situation was different. Well, of course, mate, that's got nothing to do with Australia. That's got everything to do with the people that are telling you the BS. I guess maybe that's what he has to say. Maybe the issue here is, it's not Australia. It's not the problems that we have here. It's the fact that you've got people selling snake oil to get them over here. And I think our government is going to do the same thing, particularly with migration. I've met people who've come over to Australia who have studied master's quality, you know, high quality degrees, spent a lot of money, and couldn't find work in their field. But when he got here, the situation was very different. He said he had worked in 5 restaurants where he'd been underpaid, including one where he was paid $70 for 6.5-hour shifts. Since his hours working as a paper deliverer were cut during the pandemic, he's been unable to pay back the loan to his bank in India, which is charging 13% interest. Although the bank has been accommodating, his next lot of university fees is now due, and the bank won't release further money until he starts to pay down some of his existing loan. I mean, we had a friend, a roommate from Portugal. She came over, studied architecture here, and she just couldn't pay the fees after a while. The poor girl, she came over here because her father was an architect. He passed, and I think she felt, you know, pressured to go and study in Australia for some reason. Yeah. He doesn't feel that the education was worth it, as his course is going over material already covered in his bachelor's degree. Oh, well, there you go. There you have it. I mean, that's what I mentioned in my own experiences in studying here in Australia. You know, repeat stuff. It's, well. So he already had a bachelor's and he's coming over for a postgrad. There you go. The cost of living we can't afford. With the rule of only being able to work 20 hours a week, and the exploitation and the stress, it's a very big issue for students, he said. So I don't recommend prospective students coming here. Instead, they can go to the UK for much less fee. Well, there you have it. I was always told that Australia was the poor man's United States with regards to international education. At least that's what the older lecturers used to tell me at university. The federal government said extending JobKeeper and JobSeeker to people on temporary visas, including international students, would have cost a further $20 billion. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is, if they go back home, that's something they're never going to pay for. It's hard. This is harsh reality, guys. This is what happens when you lock down the economies. People get stuck in this situation. ABC, on one hand, they're advocating for restricting our freedoms and lockdowns, and then they're advocating for this. You know, I know we could just save we could pay for that by maybe cutting some ABC costs. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. However, Dr. Bird said the decision not to had cost Australia's reputation as a good place to study. It was a short-sighted economic decision, and one that was not taken by other countries and had similar education markets like the UK, Canada, and Ireland, she said. Well, I mean, all of our political decisions are short-sighted. So you can see here, a sector that's highly dependent on international students, the property sector, renting out a lot of those investment properties. Look at that decline in numbers, everyone. 60% hit throughout the year. But look in June, from 34 down. What do you think, everyone? Do you think that will manifest in property? When will we start to see it? Are people already thinking, time to get out? Maybe those cash cows are disappearing. As always, thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and want to support the content I create, there are a few ways you can. You can join the channel on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us using our affiliate links on Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or Kucoin. You can buy a merch from HeiseSays, use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Take care, have a great day. I'll see you next time.